The world is sad, the world is sick, and the devil keeps on lying. But we'll tell the truth through thin and thick and keep the devil crying. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's This Week in Jihad, back yet again with the great, the one, the only, the David the Wood, and I, Robert Spencer, author of The Quran. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, David. How are you?
How you doing, Robert? I'll be sharing this link for a couple seconds to let everyone know that we're live. But yeah, we're all good here.
Well, I will just, in light of the fact that you're doing that, I'll just set up, I think, what's on everybody's mind at the moment, and that is that our dear friend, Hatun Tash, one of the most courageous people in the entire world, has not been heard from for a couple weeks. Nobody seems to know where she is. We hope and pray that she is okay. But David does have, before we assume the worst, David does have a bit of a piece of mitigating or possibly mitigating information.
Yeah, that's just before everyone jumps to conclusions and concludes that she's missing and dead or something like this. Hatun just deciding to do something and just going and doing it without telling people is kind of a Hatun thing to do. So we're mainly wondering why we're not hearing from her, but also just sort of going off even without her phone or paying attention to social media is also a Hatun type thing to do. I've seen people saying she's been missing for 2 weeks. I saw another from saying that she saw some friends. Her friends saw her like less than a week ago. So yeah, not sure what to go with. The main concern. So and any other time, if Hatun had just wandered off and wasn't notifying anyone and disappeared because she's out, preaching or something like that, wouldn't have been much of a concern. That the reason people are a little more concerned now is just because with Hamas and the protests and jihadis marching through the streets and so on, and Muslim da'is being concerned about the avalanche of apostasy and thinking that violence and showing how violent and tough they are is the only way forward. It seems like a heightened time of danger, and so that's the reason people are concerned right now. It's like, okay, now's a different time. Now we actually want to hear from her to make sure she's okay. But yeah, I would say I suspect she's okay somewhere preaching the gospel to someone right now. But yeah, would really like to hear from her. So we'll see.
Well, we certainly hope you're right about that, David, and please do pray for her. Whatever her situation, prayers will always be helpful, and so please do keep her in your prayers. And of course, I'm sure it will be international news once she reappears, as we all hope she will do soon. In any case, we do have quite a lot of jihad tonight, unfortunately, and the jihadis are indeed emboldened everywhere. As a matter of fact, David, by popular demand, I do those poems at the beginning of the show because they are so widely acclaimed by literary experts and scholars of English and American literature.
I mean, after a year of This Week in Jihad, you could just put together your book of poetry.
Yes, a surah like it. A number of surahs like it. As a
Oh
matter of
yeah,
fact,
yeah. We will challenge Muslims. Produce poems like Robert Spencer, or acknowledge that he's a true prophet. And oh, by the way, we are the judges of the contest.
yes, exactly. So anyway, I was almost going to not have a poem this week because it does get pretty dark when you're dealing with jihad all the time, and it brought to mind actually a passage from the Book of Revelation that I was all day I was thinking I'd just start with that instead of a poem, and then I thought that I don't want to let down the literary establishment of the Western world, so I went ahead with the poem. But in Revelation chapter 18, it is speaking about how the great city of Babylon, and of course people have argued as to what is meant by that for 2,000 years now, but the great city of Babylon has been thrown down and the passage is an indictment in various ways of the great city. And what is noteworthy is that it says, all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And I thought, all nations were deceived. Man, we are in an apex of deception, a time of a real crest of the deceptiveness of the jihad in the West. And take, for example, the craze that has arisen since we were last here, David, of people converting or praising Islam. It started out with people praising Osama bin Laden, and now it's gone on to people praising the Quran, converting to Islam on TikTok, talking about in their TikTok videos about the wonders of the Islamic faith. This is one of them, a self-described leftist queer gremlin who has now donned the hijab, as you can see.
Well, in her defense, her eyesight's near 20/20. No, just kidding. What's wrong with you? Why are you being mean, Robert?
Yeah, I'm the mean one. You say something like that, and then boom, it's on me. That's a very jihad move, as a matter of fact.
But look what you do. You always you condition me to do this stuff by laughing hysterically at these horrible comments I make, which encourages me to make more and more horrible comments.
Yes. Well, that's I guess we'll have to start the carpet bombing. I don't know, but in any case, there was another one I had here. I thought. But I can't find him now. Another one of these clowns. Oh, here he is. This guy here, or whatever he is. And I just came across another one, but I think we'll have to leave it for next week. This woman with multicolored hair speaking about how the wife-beating passage in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 34, is really not as bad as it might seem to the uninitiated. But in any case, this is a massive case of deception. And of course, the Dawa boys are crowing about it. I saw one of them saying, who would have thought the people who've been fighting Islam since 9/11 now have to deal with all these young people who love the Quran and Osama bin Laden. And I thought, well, actually, this doesn't surprise me at all. Does it surprise you, David?
No, and that's been since 9/11, because after every huge terrorist attack that we had, every news agency and every politician wanted to show that they're not Islamophobic, and they would do that by bringing in Muslim spokesmen to tell everyone how wonderful Islam is over and over and over again. And things haven't changed. The only thing that's changed is that now it's on social media, where you have these terrorist attacks, and then everyone runs on social media saying, "Oh yeah, but Islam is great and Islam is wonderful." What's weird about all of this is, in the past, the thing that's actually changed is that in the past, I was just talking about this on a show that I recorded with Brother Rashid. We were talking about Hamas freeing the hostages and so on, and people praising Hamas for releasing these hostages and so on. Anyway, we did a show about Muhammad taking hostages and how Muhammad treated hostages and so on. So we were doing that, and all of a sudden it hit me, because we were reading Surah 8, verse 67, which says it's not for a prophet to take captives until you've made a great slaughter. And so we're looking at the pattern. Slaughter a bunch of people first, then take hostages. Slaughter a ton of people, then take hostages. That's Surah 8, verse 67, for everyone who wants to check it out. But notice it's exactly what Hamas did. So these guys who have this verse of the Quran memorized go out, slaughter a bunch of people, and take hostages exactly like Muhammad did. Anyway, we were talking about this with Brother Rashid, and I realized we're responding like it's 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago, people were going to say this has nothing to do with Islam, and anyone who says it has something to do with Islam is a racist and a bigot and an Islamophobe, and therefore we would have to go to the Muslim sources to show that it actually comes from Muhammad and the Quran. And I said, but now it's different. Now they're just praising bin Laden and all this stuff. So I don't think we're in that situation anymore. I think we're entering a new age where young people are like, yes, it's Islam, and we love it because it's the cool thing to do on social media. Just praise this stuff, and it's a good way to get attention. And that's
Yep.
that's all it is. That's all it is at the end of the day. You take something like any one of these people who praises the Quran. Uh, Guess what? As soon as they say, "Hey, the Quran is really awesome. I've been reading it. It's amazing," they get a ton of attention, which encourages them to do it again, which encourages other people to do it again. And so, yeah, real impressive.
And of course, you're absolutely right. It's the fruit of 20 years of propaganda and indoctrination that Islam is wonderful, that the biggest lesson of 9/11 was that we have to be careful about Islamophobia. These people, they're not really as rebellious as they think. They're just reflecting what they've been taught and how they've been indoctrinated for all these years.
Yep, they've been programmed.
Yes, they have. Speaking of being programmed and indoctrinated, let's go to Dr. Fadi Kablawi.
Woohoo!
Dr. Dr. Kablawi, who's got
It's
one
kablooey. It's kablooey. It's kablooey.
He's got one of the best names of any imam in the world. And he is a cleric in Florida. And he said that the war in Gaza is a war on Islam. Now, David, why would he say such a thing? I thought this was all about land and occupation.
No, I think it's got something to do with Islam.
Yeah? What on earth could it have to do with Islam?
Yeah, it's me and Rashid were just talking about how, of course, once Muhammad, for the first 12 years of his public ministry, is telling people that the Jews are going to confirm him, that the Jews are the authority, that the Jews are going to give him the thumbs up as a prophet. And then, of course, he runs out and eventually meets all the Jews, and they condemn him as an obvious false prophet, and then he wants to slaughter and subjugate them. And so, and even before that, in Mecca, when he was surrounded by other people, he didn't have the Jews there, but you had certain pagans who knew where his stories were coming from. And so you had people like Al-Nadir, who would hear Muhammad recite a story and then say, I can give a story better than that. And then he'd jump up and recite verses of his own, challenge the Muslims, show me how Muhammad, his story is better than mine. They couldn't, and so they eventually just killed him. But Muhammad was obsessed with...
then challenged make a surah like it, which he had just done.
Yeah. And so he answered the challenge of the Quran. No one could respond to him, so they kill him instead when they actually capture him. But notice it's always like Muhammad just not being able to handle any sort of criticism, any sort of people who can expose him, and this eventually leads to the entire world needs to be subjugated in the name of Allah. No one can speak against Muhammad or the Quran, and we're right in the middle of them trying to do it. And so this is a big war that goes beyond any little particular battles over land.
Indeed. All right, we got so much. I guess we'll go to the kinetic jihad here. We have in let's see here. So many things. It's an embarrassment of riches, so to speak. Mahmoud Musa was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Let me see. I couldn't find his picture earlier, and that is I don't know what, David. I just don't understand why these things are not where I put them. But anyway, this guy, he's a classic Salafi. He's got the beard. He's got the kufi. He's got the kaftan, and he in 2021 he happened upon a Jewish man, Joseph Borgen, in Times Square, and he pepper sprayed him. He brutally beat him while raining down anti-Semitic slurs upon him. He was just sentenced to 7 years in prison. And there were quite a few Muslims in the crowd at the courthouse, and they immediately started calling the judge racist and claiming that the sentence was not fair. But I couldn't help but wonder, what if it had been the other way around?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think he would have gotten 7 years. It would have been much more.
Yeah, and if the situation were reversed and a person attacking a Muslim got 7 years, they would be saying it's racist for not giving him more time.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what happens, they're just going to scream racist because that's what they've been programmed to do.
And they know it works. It still works in
Yeah.
America today. And so even though Islam is not a race and there are jihadis and ordinary Muslims of all races, nonetheless, it still works. Okay, we got quite a few stories from France, as you may imagine. And one of them is a Muslim migrant from Guinea, that is in Africa, not an Italian. He had several knives and threatened passersby, screaming Allahu Akbar. A teacher was walking by, he attacked him. And meanwhile, I wanted to note, David, let me see, that in Austria, while this kind of thing is going on all over Europe, and there are actually several other ones in France, but that one in France reminded me of this one in Austria. A guy walks into another Muslim migrant, a Syrian in this case. He walked into a cathedral, the very beautiful St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna. Let's see. See if I can find that. Yeah, there it is. It's an impressive looking structure. So he walks in there. He's got a screwdriver. And he is saying that he will use the screwdriver to slit the throats of those who are in the cathedral.
Oh, I thought he was going to like help him fix something.
Yeah, and the cops, they can't figure out what his motive could possibly be.
It's that sudden jihad derangement syndrome.
They're still doing this.
Yeah, just randomly.
After all these years, you would think that the cops would have figured out what the motive was. Maybe these people would not have this kind of thing going on so often, but it's still the same old story, the same denial. Also, yes, David. Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out because we're interested in when the situations are reversed or changed somehow. Notice when a Muslim is attacked anywhere in the world, people instantly jump to Islamophobia. And it seems to be, with disturbing frequency, to be the result of some other Muslim attacking the Muslim. But notice all this, hey, we really just have no clue what a person's motives are, even if someone's stating it, and even if we've seen it thousands and thousands of times before. We have no basis of figuring out what people's motives are. And whatever the person says his motives are, I saw this on an episode of Law and Order where this guy's like screaming jihad and stuff. And by the end, they find out that he's just like upset because his mom left him or something like that. But it can't actually be motivated by jihad. And so it's a result of the conditioning that if you've been told for decades that the Quran is all about peace and love and tolerance and so on, and someone says, hey, I'm slaughtering these people in the name of Allah, it's got to be some other reason, because you couldn't possibly be getting that from where you say you're getting it from. But when it's the reverse and you just hear a Muslim has been attacked, you see it's the Islamophobes motivated by Robert Spencer.
Yep. And so also in Austria, also in Vienna, in another church, Keplerkirche in Vienna. I think I said that right. Keplerkirche, Kepler Church. Anyway, guy goes in, 29-year-old Muslim. He sees a statue of Mary. He tears it down. He sees a big wooden cross. He tears it down and carries it out of the church. And what did the cops say? The cops did not say in this case they didn't know his motive. They ruled out a religious motive. Now, the mind reels.
So he knocks over a statue of Mary and carries out the cross.
Yes. What on earth could there possibly be for his motive other than a religious motive?
Some people just don't like the shapes or statues in general, Robert.
That must be it. Yep. So that's Austria, but I was detoured here. I wanted to stay in France. In France, we also have The beheading of Samuel Paty, the school teacher a few years back who showed a Muhammad cartoon to his class in a class on the freedom of speech, and then was beheaded by a Muslim migrant from Chechnya shortly afterward. There are 6 teenagers who tipped off the killer as to which one was Samuel Paty so that he could be killed. And they have gone on trial this week. And so the question will be whether charges that they are being persecuted for Islamophobia, will they win out over the possible role that they had in this murder, which of course is a very important incident in the history of the West, really. This is the kind of thing that people are going to look back on and say, whatever happened to the free societies that there used to be in Europe? And this will be one of those things that was a big push on the way toward the loss of the free society, that people began to kowtow to Islamic law instead of standing up for the freedom of speech when it was difficult.
Along those lines, are you planning to, because this is about jihad, but are you planning to address Geert Wilders' victory in the Netherlands at any point?
I had not, but we can. No
Oh,
reason
yes.
why not.
Just because you were on the topic of killing someone over showing a cartoon, and then wasn't Geert at the cartoon contest in Texas when jihadis actually showed up and we're going to slaughter you all in the name of Allah?
Yeah.
Was he there? He was there?
There were 4 of us who were speaking. Pamela Geller and me, and Bosch Foston, the cartoonist, of course, who won the contest, and Geert Wilders. There was no indication that they were aware of Geert Wilders in particular. They just didn't like the Muhammad cartoon idea. And actually, Wilders had left. We had our whole event, and it was a very nice event, really, complete success. And they opened fire outside after the event had ended. I guess they were waiting for the people to start coming outside, and they were going to open fire, but they got impatient. But in any case, Wilders had another engagement, or he had to catch a flight or something. He had already left. And so there was no chance that they were going to get him, even if they had wanted to. Mm-hmm. But in any case, he has stood for the freedom of speech in this age of jihad, for the right of people to offend, even when they are violating Islamic blasphemy laws. And so it's momentous that he won such a large vote in the Netherlands, but the Netherlands is so far gone that the other parties look like they're banding together to keep him from being able to be prime minister.
And do you think the sudden surge in popularity of his party had something to do with the recent protests and people calling for jihad and people calling for legal changes to give Islam a special place in Europe where you can't criticize the Quran and so on? You think it's all connected?
Oh, I don't have any doubt about it, David. It's very clear that the October 7th jihad massacre in Israel was a turning point for Muslims in the West. And they think now is the time maybe to go to the next level, maybe to move from the first stage of jihad as delineated in the Quran and in the classic commentaries on the Quran, that first you have the tolerance, and then when you reach a certain level of population or of influence in the culture, then you move to the next level of jihad, and then you move to which is defensive, and then you move to offensive jihad. And in any case, it does seem as if they are looking for, or they have taken the opportunity to become much more aggressive and emboldened, but that has led to a pushback. And the pushback, of course, is indicated by the victory of Wilders, and I think that we're going to see more of that sort of thing as well. This guy is saying Hatun has been found, so I'm just checking to see if he's just gaslighting I'm
Yeah,
not seeing anything. You seeing anything? I'm not
no,
seeing
I
anything.
went and looked around real quick. I would assume my messages would be lighting up right now, something like that, unless he's like the first person to hear of it or something. But yeah, I would need
Yeah,
further confirmation of that.
looks like it's just spamming. But in any case, okay. Also in France, we have the sad story of this young man whose name is Thomas Poretto, and he was at a dance in a small town, Crépole, in France, in rural France, and a group of Muslim Arabs came in, started to attack people, said, "We want to kill white people," and they stabbed him to death, and then 17 others were wounded. This is a direct result, actually, of the policies of the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, because Emmanuel Macron recently was under a lot of pressure in that the cities in France had been transformed into essential war zones by the migrants. And so he announced this ingenious plan to have people resettled in the rural areas. But now the jihad violence is going to the rural areas. It's even more difficult. So, David, I am still seeing all this going by in the comments, but I'm not seeing anything when I
Yeah, guys.
search.
Yeah, if you're saying, tell us where you're getting this from, because other than that, it's just some people in the chat, and there are people in the chat who habitually make stuff up.
Yeah, and so this is getting distracting. I'm just going
And
to ban these people if you keep on doing this.
yeah, and you can come back and unban them later if it turns out they were telling the truth or something.
Yeah. All right. So, onward. We have better get to some stupid infidels. We already got to the stupid infidels in Austria, but in response to, in France, the killing of Thomas Poretto and the storming of this party, the French Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin has announced that he's going to shut down far right groups. And this is like in Ireland, where the Prime Minister of Ireland, there was recently a stabbing of 4 people by a Muslim migrant in Dublin, and then there were violent demonstrations by the Irish against mass migration into Ireland. And Leo Varadkar, in response, the Prime Minister of Ireland, has been saying, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to crack down on speech and criminalize criticism of the migrants. Now, of course, this is not going to work because, unfortunately, the jihadis are going to keep on being violent, and he has invited quite a lot of them in.
Yeah, we've been saying this for, well, I've been saying it for decades now, that, you know, at the end of the day, in Western nations, we can vote leaders in and vote them out, and the people have way more power than they realize. And you just have to, enough people just have to get fed up to say, we're not putting up with this anymore. And then you can scream Islamophobia and do whatever you want. It's not going to work. You can't, you're not going to lock up 2/3 of the population who are ticked off over your insane policies. So yeah, we might just be in this transitional phase where people are starting to say we can't leave the future of our children and grandchildren in the hands of these guys. We can't do it. We gotta do something now. So
Yeah, I think things are unfortunately coming to a critical mass in that regard. It's very late. It might be too late in many places in Europe and in certainly Ireland and the British Isles in general. It's going to be very difficult to avoid violence. But for one thing, they could do is get rid of rulers like this prime minister. Meanwhile, there is a corresponding counter movement. This is a Belgian MP from Iran, Daria Safai. And Daria Safai wrote on Twitter the other day, when I was detained in Tehran in 1999 in the Ayatollah's prison, I could never have imagined that one could also be imprisoned in the West for the same reason. The day before yesterday, it was announced that one could also be imprisoned in the West for the same reason. The day before yesterday, it was announced in the United States that they have a comprehensive plan to fight Islamophobia. What might this national plan entail? Criminalizing Islamophobia and making it punishable. And of course, this is somebody from Iran, David, somebody who knows very well what they're dealing with when they're talking about Islam and Islamic rule and Sharia. And she's come to Belgium and is in the parliament and is now fighting against laws to criminalize Islamophobia, just like Leo Varadkar is trying to pass in Ireland. And, well, we can only hope that the sanity will win out and there will be some effort to stand up against all this. But I tell you, it's crazy stuff. David, this is Kira Lewis. Kira Lewis is actually was a counselor in Britain. That's some local official, right? City councillor, that kind of thing. And she was a counselor for the Labour Party, which is far left. And she shared an article criticizing Hamas and has resigned under pressure because it's bad on the left these days to criticize Hamas.
Going back to the Iranian woman, it's interesting that there have always been people, talking for decades, who've been warning Western nations about, hey, you guys thinking you're protecting people by making these laws against criticizing Islam or just calling people Islamophobes whenever they point these things out? You don't realize what you're doing. I mean, think about this. I mean, Pastor Daniel Scott. I mean, that was decades ago now, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
At least 15 years or so ago. But yeah, Daniel Scott in Australia, a guy who had to flee Pakistan because they were going to kill him for violating their blasphemy laws. He goes to Australia and, here I can point out some of the problems that they were going to kill me for back there. And he gets arrested. He gets arrested for it. He gets arrested in Australia. And in court, he tries to explain to them, hey, look, we're going. Let me show you from the Quran why I have a problem with what's going on here. And no, you can't read from the Quran. You're upsetting the Muslims. And it's just this amazing situation. And you get all the way down to our time, and we're still figuring out ways to punish people who criticize killing apostates, beating women into submission, taking sex slaves. U.S. governments are still trying to figure out ways to punish people for criticizing things that definitely need to be criticized. And you've got all these people who come from Iran and Pakistan and so on are saying, guys, you don't know what you're doing here. You need to really, we just came from places like this. We just came from places where they punish people for criticizing Islam. How are you doing the exact same thing? We had to flee countries because they punish people for criticizing Islam. And what are you doing here? And people just won't believe them. You know what it actually reminds me of? You remember Elie Wiesel in his book Night? He said when the concentration camps started, there were Jews who actually escaped sometimes and would run back to their towns and tell people what they're doing in the concentration camps, that they're being put into ovens and stuff. The Jews of the towns would not believe them. Like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? The Germans? The people who are the people who have all the physicists, the people who are making all the operas, there's no way they're doing any of this. You're crazy. It was going on. And the people were actually there warning them. And if people had actually paid attention to the warnings of people who had been there, a lot of lives would have been saved. A lot of lives would have been saved.
David, it's just incredible what is going on all over the place. And it's all in connection with that this denial continues and this willful ignorance. Take, for example, this lady whose name is Rhoda Jatau, and she is in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, there was last year, you may recall, I'm sure we spoke about it on this program, there was a terrible murder of a 22-year-old student, Deborah Samuel Yakubu, who had been accused of blasphemy because she was actually lynched. She was stoned to death because she thanked Jesus Christ for helping her pass her exams. And the Muslims took umbrage, thought this was blasphemous because she did it on a college message board that they also shared. And so they murdered her. Rhoda Jatau has been held without trial ever since because she criticized the Muslims for the killing of Deborah Yakubu. And now she is actually going to go on trial soon after having spent the last 18 months in prison. And
so they kill her. They kill her for violating their blasphemy rules. And then you're not even allowed to criticize the people who kill her without being thrown in jail or something like that. They want to punish you too. But I mean, think about this. This is kind of the reason you don't want blasphemy laws here in the West, and like Western nations are still like, hey, it works so well in Pakistan and Nigeria. Why can't it work here too? My goodness, they're insane.
Yep.
They're absolutely insane.
No doubt about it. And speaking of insane, here's Chris Christie. Chris Christie is, of course, a candidate for president, former governor of New Jersey. And he recently said that the rise in anti-Semitism in the United States was the fault of his chief rival for the Republican presidential nomination, Donald Trump. Now, there's no need to get into political aspects of this, but it seems to me, David, wouldn't you agree the rise in anti-Semitism in the United States is a direct result of, on the one hand, mass Muslim migration into North America and Europe, and the normalization of Islamic anti-Semitism, combined with the left's refusal to criticize anything Islamic, and the demonization of Israel as a result of that, so that you end up with this perfect storm of Jew hatred. And Chris Christie, all he can see is that, well, it can't be that, can't be Islam. He can't criticize Islam. That would be Islamophobic. It has to be somebody else. And of course, he sees Trump behind every rock and tree calling out, oh, Chris Christie, I am hiding behind the rocks and trees. Blame me.
Yeah, it's this weird situation. Guys, like indoctrination has consequences. And so you take a situation like, jihadis launch terrorist attacks in the U.S., terrorist attacks in the U.K., terrorist attacks in France, terrorist attacks in Russia, terrorist attacks all over the world. I mean, India, Nigeria. You could do every week. You could just do This Week in Jihad in Nigeria. You could do that. That's how relentless it's been. And politicians and journalists have always had to come up with alternative explanations for why this is happening. And so when you have these relentless jihad attacks on Israel, they have to explain it as something else. And you can't say that it has something to do with Islam. So it's just, yeah, it's Israel's fault. Jews are the problem. And if Muslims are going to keep protesting and rioting and so on over the Jews, and you can't blame the Muslims, you have to blame the Jews. And so now everyone's united in condemning the Jews, and shocker, rise in anti-Semitism.
Yep. So, you have now actually reminded me, as time is running out here, we should actually deal with some jihad. We've been dealing with stupid infidels for the most part all this time. So we have a story out of a place we don't usually hear much from, and that is Poland. In Warsaw, a Muslim woman was arrested for planting an explosive device on a Warsaw street. Now, why do we so rarely hear about jihad in Poland, David?
Yeah, they got some crazy idea I don't know where they got it. It's the weirdest thing ever. I mean, it's pretty much the same idea that European nations in general had for the past 14 centuries, but everyone else changed their mind at the same time except Poland. But they decided, hey, let's not bring in tons of jihadis. It's weird. I don't know. Like these guys are nuts, man. But anyway, they decided that as France and UK were saying, we need more, just bring in more. If you hate our culture and you hate our values and so on, and you want to completely replace them and go on raping sprees and burn everything to the ground when you don't get your way, come here. We want you. We can't get enough of you. And Poland's like, yeah, I don't think so. So I don't know what's wrong with those. I would start making some, Polak jokes or something like that, but
Yeah.
something's wrong. Something's wrong with them. What else could it be?
Well, you could always make jokes about the other countries that have gone the other way. This is Nicoletta, and she was a 17-year-old Greek girl, and this is her Pakistani boyfriend who strangled her to death in Greece. And he explained that she kept cursing Muhammad. Now, you know something? I got to tell you, David, I kind of doubt that Nicoletta was cursing Muhammad. I wasn't there. I don't know them. Maybe she was. But I just submit to you that a 17-year-old girl in modern-day Europe, anywhere from Spain to Greece, is just not going to have the idea that that's acceptable behavior to curse Muhammad, but is actually going to think, oh, I better avoid Islamophobia. She already had the Muslim boyfriend, so that's even more indication that she's very unlikely to be cursing Muhammad. Meanwhile, however, you have this Pakistani migrant who knows that in his country, if he can explain that he killed somebody because she was cursing Muhammad, then he gets off. Might as well try it in Greece. He might not even be aware of how different it is there. And it might not even be different anymore.
Yeah, and you have the same thing over and over again where Western nations keep making the incredibly insane, stupid assumption that everyone everywhere is basically all the same and has the same values and so on. So you can just, and then they bring in a family and then, the dad and brother killed the sister for not wearing a burqa. What's going on there? We thought they really loved our culture and weren't like that anymore. And here you have people who've grown up all their lives. If someone criticizes Muhammad, you can kill them, but they don't have to actually do that. Someone can annoy you or upset you for any reason, and you could just say that the person did it. It becomes a perfectly acceptable form of murder. So yeah, I'd be on the same page with you. It's always possible. We don't know. We weren't there, but much more likely that this girl didn't say anything of the sort, and this guy just used it as an excuse to kill her. So on the one hand, that's further reason that we do not want blasphemy laws here in the West, even though politicians all over the place are trying to give them to us. But two, since it's doubtful that she actually cursed Muhammad, I will. Screw that child molesting, murdering, rapist Muhammad.
Thank you, David. Mm-hmm. That was refreshing. Meanwhile, also in Greece, we have an Afghan who is now living in Greece, and he met up with an Egyptian. And they did not walk into a bar because he found out that the Egyptian had converted to Christianity. And so he stabbed him, that is, the Afghan stabbed the Egyptian convert to Christianity. He stabbed him in the temple. I think he missed. I think he was trying for the neck.
That's bad aim there.
Yeah, and the
hand. Allah will not be pleased.
Why the hand?
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, strike at their fingertips.
There you go. Chapter 8, verse 12, ladies and gentlemen. Strike at their necks and their fingertips. I agree with David. I think maybe the guy was moving, probably, almost certainly the guy's moving, and so he hits the temple. He was trying to find the neck.
Yeah, people don't understand how tricky, aim can be. Like they're all these people, that cop shot a guy who was shooting at him. Why didn't he shoot the gun out of his hands or something like that? So yeah, it doesn't work like that. If you're stabbing at someone and the person's fighting back and so on, you might hit the temple instead of the neck. It's just life.
Indeed. Good news out of Afghanistan.
What? Wait, what? Wait, what? I've never heard that sentence at any point in my entire life.
And I was being sarcastic.
Oh,
So
okay, okay. Oh,
we're
never mind.
still we're
I
still
thought,
0 for a
thought we
million.
finally got the.
So in Afghanistan, a journalist from Vice News, of all places, went over to Afghanistan, donned a hijab, and started to interview Taliban guys and asked them, "Where do you think women in abusive relationships should go for help?" And they say, "There's no abuse against women in Afghanistan. These are only accusations." And then they go on to say that a man can beat a woman who's disobedient, but that's not abuse. That's Quranic. And this is necessary because women have lesser brains.
Yeah, guys. So, I mean, notice everything he just said came from Muhammad and the Quran, right? So, Surah
Yeah.
4, verse 34. You can beat your wives into submission. Muhammad saying that women are intellectually deficient. That's why their testimony is worth half that of a man's. So they have, tiny little pea brains, and this is part of the reason you have to beat them like you would beat an animal or something like that to get it to do what you want, because they're not nearly as rational as men are. But I mean, think about the reasoning there, right? It's she asked them about abuse. What about abuse of women? And they're pointing it. Wait, from an Islamic perspective, this is not abuse. You beat your wife to teach her. This is not abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only accusations of abuse, meaning you're trying to help your wife by violently subjugating her. And so you beat her until her skin turns green, as we read in Sahih al-Bukhari. You beat her until her skin turns green. And look at, she might say, oh, look how he abused me. That's not abuse. He's trying to help you. He's helping you become a better wife. So yeah, perspective.
Mm-hmm. The same Taliban guy would no doubt say that a woman who is on her own, makes her own choices, marries who she wishes rather than who her father sells her to, and so on, she's the one who's abused. And there is no such abuse in Afghanistan.
Yep, that poor girl. Poor girl.
Yeah. Naperville, Illinois. David, Naperville, Illinois has not made an appearance on This Week in Jihad before, but
It's never made an appearance anywhere.
well, in Naperville, Illinois. But if you were to go to Naperville, Illinois, if you had gone, David, in the last few weeks, then you would have found the place embroiled in controversy because a group of Hindu students, high school age, were accused of burning a Quran. And CARE got involved, said it was a hate crime. Islamic groups were called in. All sorts of controversy ensued. There were accusations of Hindutva, incitement, and so on. Turned out that they had burned a book, but it was not the Quran. Whoops. But of course...
Oopsie, but I mean, notice, even if they had, why would that be a hate crime? You're burning a book.
Exactly. It's an amazing thing how already Sharia blasphemy laws are being internalized in the United States, and people are accepting them. It's not illegal to burn a book. You might think it's in poor taste. It's like the Nazis. Fine. But it's not illegal.
Yeah,
I get all these books behind me. If I'm going to set them on fire right after the show, you can try to get me arrested because some of them are Qurans, but it ain't going to fly.
Yeah, and it's too bad that we aren't there to like ask basic questions to CARE when they make these accusations. Like, hey, okay, so when Muhammad took Mecca and then he went around to the 360 idols of the polytheists and started stabbing out their eyes and smashing them and so on, was that a hate crime? No, it's fine when Muhammad does it. It's only a crime when you do it to our book.
That's it, man. Yes, well, you're right. The double standard is just open and unapologetic. And the thing about CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, it's never called to account. There's not a single journalist in the country who has the guts to ask a care representative a question like the one you just asked. And this is why these things just keep on happening. You know, you said a while ago that you could do a show on Nigeria every week, and that is absolutely true. I mentioned Rhoda Jatau and how she is on trial now for criticizing the murder of a Christian woman by Muslims in Nigeria over allegedly insulting Islam. But also in Nigeria, the Hizbah, the Sharia police in Kano State, have been stopping young people from attending church. Now, that's not in accord with Sharia, David. Why would they be doing that?
No, just total mystery.
Yeah. Islam must dominate and not be dominated, as Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, said. And so there are always actions by Islamic authorities to curtail the scope of the non-Muslim communities and to expand that of the Muslim communities. Elsewhere in Nigeria, we had 100 villagers abducted after they refused to pay a tax to the jihadis. What on earth? Where did they get this idea? What is this about a tax, David?
I don't know. It's the same idea ISIS had, and they were in a completely different area of the world. So no idea how people around the world in completely different areas keep coming to the exact same conclusions about what they're supposed to do with Christians.
You know what's weird is that Pakistan also, they have the Chinese working in Pakistan on the Belt and Road Initiative, and they are working to modernize various areas of Pakistan. But now the Pakistani Taliban has said, not so fast, Chi-Coms, you got to pay us a tax first. How do they get these ideas?
No idea. It's weird.
It is. It's a mystery. Maybe it must be Trump. He must have put them up to it in Nigeria and Pakistan. Just ask Chris Christie. He'll tell you.
Yep. Trump jumped into his DeLorean, fueled by 1.21 gigawatts of Islamophobia, and then traveled back in time and put all these things in the Muslim sources. It's weird.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Evil.
The power of the man and the audacity. Meanwhile, outside the Museum of Natural History in New York City, we had, I think it was the Museum of Natural History. I didn't actually, sorry, I have so many things open and then I can't find what I want. The Museum of Natural History, there was a demonstration in favor of Hamas and they were screaming Allahu Akbar, but sorry, David, I can't find the other story right away, but oh yeah, here it is. It was the Museum of Natural History. They were praying in the street, lined up, stopped traffic, just like we've seen so many times in France and elsewhere, praying out in the middle of the street, and everybody has to stop and have their paths disrupted. Why not just pray in a mosque? They got plenty of mosques in New York City. Why not just pray even on the sidewalk so that the cars could pass? What's the deal with praying in the street, David?
Sounds like they're flexing to me. Sounds like they're flexing on everybody. It's a show of strength and force, and a warning to everyone of what lies in their future. It always enters my mind whenever I see that, how they claim to respect Jesus. You know, the guy who said, don't pray to be seen by others. And like everything they do is meant to be seen by others. Fasting is meant to be seen by others. Praying is meant to be seen by others. And yet Jesus condemns it.
Yep. It's a vastly different ethos, really. Completely the opposite. So the respect for Jesus, it's really, well, you know, then they have the convenient excuse that they claim that the Bible is corrupted, so anything they don't like in it, they can just claim that it was put in there later. Anyway, this is Lareb Hashmi. And Lareb Hashmi is a student in India. And the other day he got on the bus. I think he was going to class. And he just happened to carry his cleaver with him. Because you know how you want to have a cleaver with you. You never know when you might need to chop some meat.
Yeah,
and
I've always
Yeah,
got a cleaver. I've always got a cleaver with me.
exactly.
I got a
So,
cleaver. I got a cleaver on my side right now.
well, that's good because the bus conductor, not the driver, they got conductors on the bus and drivers. I'm not quite sure how this works. But in any case, the bus conductor, as it happened, insulted Islam while the guy was on the bus with his cleaver. Now, isn't that an amazing coincidence? That Lareb Hashmi boards the bus with his cleaver. He decides to carry his cleaver to class one day. And just that same day, by an amazing coincidence, the bus conductor gratuitously decides to insult Islam in his hearing.
Yeah,
What are
that's
the
just like
odds?
that. That's just like that girl, that Greek girl, getting a Pakistani boyfriend and deciding that she's gonna rain down insults on Muhammad.
Yep. It seems as if what's actually the case is that the Indian authorities are supine in the face of jihad attacks so often that he might be hoping that if he can claim that this fellow, the bus conductor, had insulted Islam, then he will get a lighter sentence for trying to slit his throat. But obviously, there was something else going on. People are saying that he didn't pay for his bus ticket in previous trips. He was gunning for the guy or cleavering for the guy, and he made up the story about how he insulted Muhammad. Meanwhile, anti Semitism is all over the place, more open than ever. In Paris, a Jewish man got into a cab, and the cab driver turned out to be a Muslim. And he said, I will not take you, you dirty Jew. And so the guy had to get out of the cab. But of course, he was lucky. Could have been worse. He could have taken him somewhere he didn't want to go. Uh,
It is it is interesting, by the way, that the exact same group that says, look, just because there have been tens of thousands of terrorist attacks carried out in the name of our religion over the past couple decades, you shouldn't be at all concerned about anyone else in our group. You can only single out the individuals who actually do it. You can't be worried about anyone else. But these are the exact same people who, hey, look at what's going on over in Israel. Therefore, everyone in your entire group is needs to be punished in some way. But notice, I mean, that was the same idea as Muhammad. Oh, look, this guy played a prank. We will crush your entire tribe.
yes, that is indeed so. Although that story appears elsewhere as well. You'll see that in my forthcoming book, Muhammad, A Critical Biography. There's a variant of that story, happens later in Muhammad's career, shows the whole thing is fictional. The stories get fashioned to fit various places, but there are traces enough that you can tell, hey, wait a minute. The same Muhammad standing with the same guy, and he shoots an arrow and kills the guy who's insulting the Muslims. What a coincidence that this would have happened twice, or maybe it didn't. Anyway, Austria, the moral guardians are out on the streets, the Sharia police, and they brutally beat a non-Muslim teen this week for having the audacity to date a Muslim girl, which is, of course, why would that be a problem?
Well, you're not allowed. Um, Muslim men can marry non-Muslim women, Christians and Jews, but Muslim women cannot marry a Jewish or Christian man, and so they're just applying the principle there. But yeah, I mean, the underlying thesis is that the man's going to control the relationship, and so if you're a Muslim and you marry a Jewish or a Christian woman, even if she remains a Jewish or Christian woman, you're going to have control over the children. You're going to be able to raise them as Muslims, and the idea is you are taking over the reproductive capabilities of the enemy and using their women to make your future co-religionists. And so you don't want Jews and Christians or anyone else to be able to do the same thing in reverse.
Yes, indeed. Exactly. And so you can't have a Muslim woman marrying a non-Muslim man. That is forbidden under all circumstances. Muslim man can marry a woman from the people of the book with no problem, or a polytheist if she converts, but doesn't work the other way. Hey, speaking of cabs, David, now that we're done with the hour, and the old man is going to retire, I actually had a cab ride like that recently myself, like the one in France that we spoke about a few minutes ago. We of course, have not been here the last couple of weeks because we were both on the road, and I was on the road doing a few speeches and got a cab to the airport once I was done in one city. I'm not going to say which city I was in, but I get the cab, and the guy's ID says Muhammad whatever, and he's got the Palestine flag on his dashboard, and he's got the prayer beads hanging from the rearview mirror, and he keeps looking at me, in the rearview mirror, and I didn't know. Okay, is he thinking, is that Spencer, or is that a Jew, or both?
It's kind of 50-50 on
Yeah.
what he might be thinking.
Starts fiddling in the little cubby hole between the seats in the front, and I'm thinking, okay, what's gonna come? A Quran, a machete, who knows? So I started chatting him up and being dumb and happy and talking to him about the beautiful city we were in, and maybe, I don't know, maybe distracted him. He stopped staring at me in the rear view anyway. But I lived to tell the tale. I have been yelled at by cab drivers before, You have not read the Quran. Well, I have, unfortunately. But anyway, got through it, and so we can all...
Yeah, if you're ever
Yes?
in that situation, just say, "How about them child brides, eh?" And then he'll just start, "Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, we get them. Yeah."
Yep. I'm marrying a 9-year-old next week. Anyway, not me. I was quoting. Okay, well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Be grateful that you are still enjoying the gift of life. Make sure to enjoy it this week in some way that decompresses from all the news. And God willing, we'll be back next week. If there is more jihad, we can hope there will not be. And in the meantime, pray, hope, and don't worry.